Welcome back to Wild Drama Stories, where you get all the drama from a safe distance. I'm reading 3 stories for you today. Check for the timestamps in the description box. Story 1, Opie writes, My dad passed away and I've gotten all of his inheritance. My dad raised us in a strict military-style household. He was a horrible father who took things to the extreme in our childhood, and all of his children stopped talking to him. He treated us like we were his property and belittled us all of the time, almost as if he hated our existence. He actually disowned me when I was 15 because I'd gotten pregnant out of marriage with a man who was black, and kicked me out to fend for myself. So I had to figure out how to provide for myself and my child. My dad ended up contacting me a month after my mom passed away, crying and apologizing on how he treated me and my siblings, and asked if we could meet up. I decided to meet up with my dad because even though my dad wasn't the greatest father, it doesn't change my love for him. When we met up, my dad seemed very genuine, so I continued seeing him, which increased to me seeing him 3 times a week. My dad also tried contacting my siblings, but none of them gave him the time of day. I spoke to my siblings about the issue, and they basically told me to allow him to die a lonely death. Later on, my dad got super sick, and I ended up moving in with him with my 2 children to help take care of him. I learned things about my dad that I never knew, and I actually started to love being around him and see him as a different person. I chose to forgive him. It was hard looking after my dad and my 2 children as a single mother, but I pushed myself through it until his death. But during the hard times, I asked my siblings for help, and they both mocked me for even helping my dad, told me I should just throw him in an old age home, and even asked me to take pictures of him so they could see him weak. My siblings and my relationship used to be super close, but ever since I started talking to my dad, they became distant. Now that my dad has passed, I have inherited everything from him and learned that my father owned a lot more properties and had a lot more money than I could have ever imagined. My siblings feel like they are entitled to some of the inheritance and have told me if I don't give them any, they'll stop talking to me and that I'm becoming like my dad. They feel like since they had to go through having my dad as a father, that they deserve some kind of payout. I disagree with them. The reason I got the inheritance is because I gave my dad another chance. I helped him when he was at his weakest and went through a lot, juggling raising my children and caring for my dad without any of their help. Even when I begged them to help me, they just made fun of me for helping my dad and choosing to forgive him. Now, forgiveness is a choice, and I respect their choice not to forgive. But they didn't respect mine to forgive him and added more difficulty to my life. They act like it was either them or my dad, and now are acting like I'm being selfish for not sharing the inheritance my dad left for me. Am I the a-hole for not giving some of my inheritance to my brother and sister? Well, Opie, I'm a bit cynical about this story. I feel your father realized that he's going to need a caregiver after your mom passed away, and that's what motivated him to reach out to you. If he was really sorry about the way he treated his children, then it doesn't make sense to me that he left out your brother and your sister from his will, because if he understood what he put them through, why would he cut them out and in doing so cause problems between your siblings? It sounds like there's plenty of money, so I would really say you've got to share it with your brother and your sister. Take more for yourself because you did take care of him, and that's very hard work. You deserve more money, I would say, than they do. But don't cut them out. Don't be like your father. Let's get some comments and then we can go to Opie's update. Someone comments, not the a-hole overall, but your dad sure was. And honestly, with him cutting the other siblings he abused for years, just shows how much of an abusive a-hole he was and still is. Honestly, I question how genuine he was. Just one more abusive, spiteful thing your dad did before he passed. And if you choose to honor that decision, that's fine. Legally, it's your inheritance. But you'll have to live with the fallout of that decision. Someone else says, not the a-hole. You should keep the inheritance. If the siblings don't talk to you, well, you asked for help and they rejected you, not just your father. In one way, I'm with them. I would not forgive your father either, but then I wouldn't want any inheritance from him either. Someone else comments, quote, "My dad ended up contacting me a month after my mom passed away, crying and apologizing on how he treated me and my siblings, and asked if we could meet up," unquote. That wasn't an apology. That was him manipulating you into taking care of him. You were no use to him until he'd lost or driven off everyone else. And besides just using you, he cut his other kids out of the will for spite. I fully understand why they feel entitled to at least a bit of something good from a horrible father. I don't want to say you are the a-hole, as I think your actions are coming from a good place. But I do hope you see how your father was not worthy of you and your siblings deserved better from him. And someone else comments, "Nah, I'll disagree with everyone and say you are the a-hole. He knew what he was doing. He abused all of you to the point where all of you cut him off. Then the minute he fell sick, you caved in and forgave him. When he passed, he left you everything, and you decided not to give your siblings the payback for what they've endured. It doesn't matter what your father went through. The fact is, he still abused your siblings. You became all buddy-buddy with your siblings' abuser. I don't blame them for distancing themselves from you. You might be correct in taking their inheritance legally, but morally? Nah, you are the a-hole. And be prepared to lose your family because you already chose their abuser over them." Let's get OP's update. I just want to clarify that I never asked my siblings to come over to my dad's house and care for him. The help I was asking for was to help with their niece and nephew. During the time my dad was sick, there were rules in place where my dad was only allowed one other person at the appointment. And his doctor's appointments were a half an hour drive away. And unfortunately, the babysitter for my children moved, so I was having difficulty finding a babysitter whom I trust. I also want to clarify that I'm in no way upset at them for not choosing to forgive my dad. I'm upset at how they treated me for the choice I made to forgive, build a relationship, and care for my dad. They made a lot of low blows at me, using my past abusive relationship as ammunition. Now, I understand that they are dealing with a lot of trauma, and me seeing our dad may have opened up some wounds. Maybe they feel like I chose their abuser over them, or whatever reason they had to treat me the way they did. One of you guys made a point, being, why am I able to forgive my father, who done more to me and my siblings, but not my siblings? It got me thinking. I don't want my children to be deprived of an aunt and uncle because of money. So I do think the best option is to give them some of the inheritance. I have not figured out the amount I will give them or how I'll divide things. Opie, I think that's very wise of you to look at the bigger picture and to share some of that inheritance with your siblings. And on we go to story number 2. Opie writes, "So I, 24 female, am engaged to my long-term fiancé, 25 male, and we have a great relationship. His mom is somewhat nice towards me for the most part, but I finally lost my cool a few weeks back. Let me preface by saying that I cannot have kids. It's a fact that we have come to terms with, even though it really hurts. But we've moved on with our lives, knowing that we can't have kids. A couple of weeks back, my fiancé randomly said his mom noticed I gained a lot of weight. Thanks PCOS, and thought I was pregnant. To appease her, he went out and bought a pregnancy test and told me that I didn't have to take it, but she wanted proof that he bought one. I took it, it was negative, and I told him that I'm not taking another test. Later that night, he calls to tell her that I'm not going to take any more tests, and she immediately starts crying and saying that all she wants is for us to have kids so she can be a grandmother once again. She has 4 grandkids already. She knows I can't have kids. I finally snapped and told her that if she wanted one so badly, then she would be responsible for my fertility treatments, my medical bills, and funeral costs if I were to die during labor. Now his family won't talk to him and said that I sent her into a deep depression. My fiancé isn't mad at me, but I do feel bad that his family won't talk to him. Am I the a-hole? No, Opie, I don't think you are the a-hole. I think your mother-in-law is insensitive and it sounds like manipulative as well. Let's get some comments and replies from Opie before we get a lengthy update from Opie. Someone comments, "Is she stupid or malicious? You have no doubt explained to her in very small words your condition. The fact that she's playing it as if she's the victim makes me think she's malicious. Do his family only know what she's told them?" And to this Opie replies, "From what I understand, yes, his grandparents, aunts, uncles and cousins only know what she has told them. His grandparents haven't answered his calls, but they have told me before how much they adore me. His cousins don't typically get involved too much in his life, but his mom is very close with his aunt, and I was already blocked by multiple family members on Facebook. Not that I care because it's Facebook." Someone else says, "Not the a-hole. Your fiancé needs to learn boundaries. He bought and had you take a pregnancy test because his mother said so? Wow! Your fertility/family planning are nobody's business besides you and your future husband. As a couple, you and your fiancé together need to make it clear that this topic is not up for discussion/debate and stick to it. If your fiancé doesn't support this and boundaries with his mom, do you really want to marry into that family? Or marry your fiancé and move far away so you don't have to deal with mother-in-law?" Opie replies, "Trust me, I have been putting in the work to help him set those boundaries, whether it was knowingly or not. He had come a long way from when we first started dating, and I wonder if maybe she's struggling with the fact that he's not a pushover anymore. Since meeting me, he found a better paying job, wants to go back to school, moved out on his own with me, and became way more independent. He's the baby of the family and was a huge mama's boy, which is why I feel bad, because at the end of the day, that crazy woman is still his mother." Let's get a final comment before we get Opie's update. Someone writes, "Not the a-hole. Mother-in-law was way out of line here. Fertility trauma is a very real thing, and she had no idea how this could have affected you. Not that she cared, of course. Her actions were all about her own feelings at the expense of everyone else. You did the right thing in calling out her crappy behavior, and I'm glad your fiancé has your back. From now on, I'd insist on any communications from his family going through him. They're not your problem to deal with." And here's Opie's update. "I talked to my fiancé when he woke up and told him how I felt about this whole situation. He's going over to his parents today to talk to them and told me that he's going to reaffirm to his mom that making me take pregnancy tests is doing more harm than good, and that I will not be doing this again. He also told me that he wants to be with me, regardless if we have kids, and that he didn't really argue with her because she gave him the money to buy the tests, after he said he was broke to avoid buying them. He apologized for buying them in the first place and said it wouldn't happen anymore. And yes, this is not the first time she has made me take a pregnancy test, because she always hoped that we would have a miracle child. Trust me, I want a miracle child too, but I'm not willing to risk my life for a fetus that may not be viable. That may make me selfish, but if that's the case, then so be it. He said he's going to set harder boundaries with her and his family, and if they cannot respect it, then he will cut contact entirely. I don't want him to cut contact with his family, but he's adamant that he doesn't want a relationship with them if they won't respect his boundaries or me. Hope to have an update soon." And we do have another update from Opie. He went over. She screamed and cried again. He called his brother and they both were able to tell her that she's being overly dramatic and her longing for more grandkids is not worth losing her son over. She calmed down and apologized to him, but said she doesn't want to see me, which is fine because I told my fiancé that I don't feel comfortable seeing her until I can come to terms with everything. He is minimizing contact with her until everything settles down, even though I told him that I don't want him to feel like he had to do that. I'm going to look into fertility treatments, but not for her, because you have all given me wonderful advice on how to handle PCOS. For anyone that is wondering, it really isn't just the PCOS, but I also have blockages and scar tissue from previous events that I will not disclose. And I actually can't have a period without being on hormonal medication to produce one. Side effects of the medication include rapid mood swings during a cycle, and I just so happen to be starting one, so whoops on my part. For those saying she didn't force me, you don't have to deal with the nasty texts or screaming phone calls when she doesn't get her way. This isn't the first time she and I have gone toe-to-toe because I didn't do what she wants, and it won't be the last. My fiancé knows this better than anyone because he generally receives the brunt of it. This is the first time that I have ever interjected myself into their conversation to stand up for myself. They also don't speak English as a first language, and I don't understand their native language. So I can't say that he wasn't defending me because I only heard what she was saying, which she deliberately chose to say in English so that I could hear it. He was speaking in their shared language, so again, I can't say whether or not he was defending me, and I didn't ask before I went off on her. As of right now, the baby talk is completely banned, and if it happens, it happens. If not, I'm still going to continue living my life as is. Story 3. Opie writes, I want to start this off by saying this had to have literally happened in 3 minutes or less. When I was in high school, I was often home alone and unattended. Relatively good neighborhood, nothing to genuinely fear. So I would spend around 4:30 to 9 completely alone in a decent-sized house. It wasn't necessarily scary, but just sort of eerie to me. One night, though, there was a break-in. It wasn't anything really scary because I was down in the basement and just heard the dude break in the screen door and start rummaging through the kitchen. Now, at the time, I myself did not have a personal phone, and the landline is in said kitchen. Due to me being in the basement, I did have my dad's axe to my immediate disposal, but I was not some 6'4" man giant. I was a 5'8" dude who barely even did PE. So what did I do? I decided to effing throw it at him. I carried the weighty thing up the stairs as quiet as I could and managed to get the door open enough to slip out with it. I sort of walked into angle, screamed at the top of my lungs, and just effing hurled it at the guy. I missed, but I genuinely think the poor dude pissed himself before he made a beeline for the screen door he'd shattered. The blade didn't hit anything, but dented the wall pretty bad. I eventually called the cops, then my parents. If you robbed a house in Alabama and had an axe nearly embedded in your head, I sincerely do apologize. Hope you did reconsider some decisions though. And that's it for this installment of Wow Drama Stories. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and please consider subscribing and hit the notification bell. Until next time, wishing you a drama-free life.